the Zarak Empress, known across galaxies as the Devourer of Suns, ruled through fear. She conquered without mercy. Worlds bent the knee before her crown. Then one day, she came to Earth, not to destroy, but to deliver a message of surrender. Humanity had refused her terms, so she came herself with her grand fleet to watch them kneel. Instead, she encountered Child, a girl, maybe 8 years old, sitting quietly on a hillside. The Empress froze. Her guard stepped back. Then she turned and fled, without speaking, without explaining. To this day, no one knows why. But she never ruled again, and the galaxy whispers a warning. Do not harm the children of Earth. The Earth's atmosphere trembled with the faint pulse of a presence unlike any before. Far beyond the reach of its people's scattered telescopes, the Zarak flagship Oblivion throne sliced through the void, a monolith of obsidian and blood-red energy, eclipsing the sun's familiar glow. Its hull, woven with alloys mined from dying stars, absorbed light and hope alike, blotting out the warmth of the sky for those who looked up. Around it, a silent armada in perfect formation, a disciplined procession of dreadnoughts, carriers, and countless support craft, enclosed Earth like a cage woven of darkness and steel. The usual chatter of cosmic conflict was absent. Only the hum of the Oblivion throne's engine vibrated in the void, a heartbeat against the backdrop of starlight. Inside the flagship's throne room, draped in shadows and red ambient light, Queen Vespera sat upon her ebon throne carved from the spine of a dead star. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, mirrored the cold void outside. Around her, the Council of War strategists and diplomats debated fiercely, their voices barely contained beneath the gravity of the moment. The planet below was silent. Not a whisper of transmission, no sign of shields or mobilized defenses, not a flicker of diplomatic engagement. This silence was a declaration. Earth refused to respond. To us, hissed Grand Advisor Thaurin, his serpentine form twisting in frustration. This silence reeks of defiance wrapped in ignorance. They mock us with their inaction. We have bent entire civilizations to our will for less. A murmur of agreement swept the room. The Zarak Empire had conquered planets, devoured rebellions, and extinguished stars with impunity. Yet here, in the shadow of an unassuming blue world, the expected subjugation was nowhere to be found. Vespera's gaze pierced through the darkness, unwavering. "They do not fear us," she said quietly, voice layered with a strange mixture of curiosity and respect. "Nor do they speak. Instead, they invite us to unravel their enigma." Her council exchanged wary glances. The Queen's instincts were renowned for their precision, but this path, landing unguarded on an alien world that withheld all communication, was fraught with unknowns. "Your Majesty," her chief diplomat pleaded, "to land without envoy or shield is reckless. This breaks all protocol. We risk everything on a gamble." Vespera rose with the fluid grace of a predator stalking its prey, or perhaps its mystery. "Protocol is for those who expect the world to yield," she replied. "I seek understanding, not conquest. Sometimes, the greatest power lies not in domination, but in revelation." Without waiting for further counsel, the royal craft detached itself from the belly of the Oblivion throne. Sleek and silent, the vessel shimmered as it slipped through the thin upper atmosphere, tracing a path toward a remote swath of desert on Earth's shadowed hemisphere. Far below, in a vast expanse of the Great Sandy Expanse, a neutral zone monitored by Earth's global coalition, Aya Kim adjusted her sensors, eyes narrowing behind polarized visor glass. A specialist in quantum resonance, Aya's work centered on detecting anomalies that defied natural laws. Her console flickered as an unidentified craft entered the detection field, unmarked, unarmed, and unervingly silent. "A command check," she called into her comm. "I'm tracking a descending vehicle. No known registry. No weapons. No communication." Static answered. Aya's heartbeat quickened as the craft pierced the atmosphere, slowing smoothly, its surface shifting subtly as it absorbed solar radiation. From the hatch emerged a lone figure clad in flowing robes that rippled like liquid shadow, untouched by the harsh desert winds. The figure's steps were deliberate, almost ceremonial, touching the ancient soil with reverence rather than conquest. For a moment, Earth and the alien emissary stood silent, worlds apart and yet connected by a fragile thread of curiosity. In the flagship's command center, eyes glued to the live feed, the council reeled. Bezlet, the general charged with military operations, banged his fist on the console. She dares to walk unguarded on their soil? This is madness. Recall her immediately. But the queen's voice overrode the chaos. No, she commanded, calm and resolute. This is the first honest dialogue. Aya, standing still beneath the stars, heard the subtle hum of a drone rising from the ground, an emissary of peace, or perhaps an instrument of observation. It projected a translucent message in her native tongue. Do not fear. We seek only knowledge. For the first time in decades, a smile flickered across Aya's face. Back on the Oblivion throne, Vespera turned her eyes to the spinning blue jewel beneath her, now alive with tiny lights that shimmered like the pulse of a heartbeat. We come not as conquerors, she said softly, but as witnesses to a will that defies expectation. This silence, this stillness, they speak louder than any gunfire. Her council was silent. Outside, the royal craft lifted off, disappearing into the blackness with a promise unspoken but understood. This was only the beginning. On Earth, Aya exhaled, whispering welcome. The alien craft drifted silently through Earth's atmosphere, a sleek, obsidian monolith piercing the slowly darkening sky. Below, the sprawling tapestry of the planet unfurled. Rolling hills cloaked in dense green, rivers glittering like silver threads beneath the dying light of day. The air carried the faint scent of damp earth and blooming wildflowers, untouched by the harshness of industry or war. Here, far from the sprawling megacities and the chaos of human civilization, the world breathed quietly. The Queen's ship hovered above a lone grassy ridge, where the hills rolled gently toward distant mountains. It was a place untouched by noise or conflict, where the ancient rhythms of nature still ruled unchallenged. Vespera descended slowly, her boots sinking slightly into the soft soil. The wind tugged at her robes, whispering faint echoes of old songs in a language long forgotten. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the hillside. There were no signs of defenses, no patrol drones, no sentries waiting in ambush. Only the gentle sway of tall grasses and the quiet hum of the planet's heartbeat. The melody reached her before she saw its source. A soft humming, steady and pure, floated on the breeze, a song without words, yet filled with meaning. Ahead, nestled among the wildflowers, crouched a child. The girl was small, no older than 7 or 8, with dark hair cascading loosely over her shoulders. Her bare feet pressed into the warm earth, toes curling around blades of grass. In her hands, she carefully balanced stones, smooth, rounded, weathered by time, stacking them with a patience and care that seemed almost ritualistic. She hummed a simple tune, the notes rising and falling like a gentle breeze through the trees. Vespera moved closer, the ground soft beneath her feet. The child's humming faltered, and her dark eyes lifted slowly to meet the Queen's gaze. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. There was no fear in the child's eyes, only a calm, serene acceptance. A faint smile played on her lips, as if she had been expecting this encounter all along. The Queen, though centuries old and hardened by countless battles, felt an unexpected flicker of hesitation. What was this child? Why had Earth not prepared defenses, not raised shields or weapons? The Queen's voice, when it finally emerged, was soft, almost reverent. "Who are you?" The girl said nothing. Instead, she reached out a small hand, holding out a perfectly balanced stone from her tower of rocks. Vespera hesitated before accepting the offering. The stone was cool to the touch, smooth and flawless. But beneath its surface she felt a faint, almost imperceptible pulse, a heartbeat trapped in stone. A shiver ran through the queen's spine. Visions flashed behind her eyes, fragments of memories that were not her own. A burning world, tears on alien faces, a lullaby sung beneath unfamiliar stars. The sensation was overwhelming, like a tide pulling her back through centuries, through lives she had never lived. The child's smile deepened, as if she knew the secret stirring within Vespera's mind. "Why are you here?" the queen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The child simply shrugged, eyes reflecting the last light of the setting sun. No words, no answers. Vespera knelt beside the girl, the grass brushing against her knees. She studied the child's face, the innocence, yes, but also a depth that defied her years. It was the look of one who carried ancient knowledge, who had seen worlds rise and fall. The queen's thoughts raced. How could this child be so calm, so unafraid, in the presence of an alien warlord? Was this some trick, some hidden weapon Earth had kept secret? Or was it something far older, far more dangerous? The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of rain and wildflowers. Vespera closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the moment wash over her. The child's humming resumed, pure and steady. And without understanding why, the queen found herself joining in, her voice a low, resonant note blending with the girl's song. It was a melody without language, a connection deeper than words. The sun disappeared beneath the horizon, and the stars began to appear, blinking awake in the darkening sky. Vespera rose slowly, tucking the stone into a hidden pocket within her robes. She looked down once more at the child, whose smile now held a quiet certainty, an ancient knowing. "We will meet again," the queen promised. Her ship awaited, a silent sentinel beneath the rising stars. As she ascended, the strange memory pulsed stronger in her mind, a call from a time before empires, before war. The hillside fell silent again, but Vespera knew that something profound had been awakened, something that no weapon, no fleet could easily conquer. The child watched the queen's ship disappear into the night sky, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. She stood slowly, brushing grass from her knees, and reached toward the horizon where the sky met the earth. A voice echoed softly inside her, a whisper from a time long past. "You carry the memory of worlds lost and found. You are the bridge between what was and what may yet be." She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the pulse beneath her skin, the living echo of a planet's soul. Behind her, the stones she had stacked remained balanced, silent witnesses to a meeting that might change the fate of a galaxy. Back on the flagship, Vespera retreated to her chambers, her mind a storm of questions and unease. She traced the contours of the stone in her hand, feeling the heartbeat again, faint but insistent. Her counsel would mock her curiosity, see it as a sign of weakness. But the queen knew better. This child was no mere human. She was a symbol of resilience, of hidden strength, of something older than conquest. Vespera sat at her desk and activated the archive holoscreen, summoning records of Earth's ancient past. She searched for clues, myths, anything that might explain the child's presence and the strange pulse she felt. Ancient texts spoke of a time when Earth was not just a planet, but a living entity, its very core infused with consciousness. They called it the heart of Gaia, a primordial force that shaped life itself. Could the child be a vessel of that ancient power? A guardian? The queen's fingers trembled as she considered the implications. To conquer this world would require more than fleets and weapons. It would demand understanding a force that defied her empire's laws. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to an encounter that would echo through time. On Earth, the girl returned to her stones. The wind whispered secrets in her ears. The pulse inside her grew stronger, a rhythm that connected her to the mountains, the rivers, the very soul of the planet. She was not alone. Beneath the soil, beneath the oceans, deep in the core where no eyes could see, something ancient stirred. It sensed the arrival of outsiders, the ambitions of empires, and the fragile hope that something pure still survived. And on this quiet hillside, a child hummed a song older than the stars, her eyes bright with the knowledge that destiny had chosen her as its messenger. Vespera knew the war she had come to wage might not be one of armies and weapons, but of wills and memories. The child on the hillside was the beginning, and the queen would face not just a planet, but a living enigma, one that could unravel the ambitions of the entire Zarak dominion. Long before the stars themselves had names, before empires rose and fell in the dark void, there was a race known simply as the Starborn. They were humanoid in form, but born of light and memory, beings who carried the histories of galaxies within their souls. Their power was not in weapons or conquest, but in understanding, the ability to shape reality by weaving together the threads of truth, innocence, and memory. The Starborn knew that the universe was a fragile tapestry, and within it lay a force so potent, so dangerous, that even the mightiest empires could be undone by its touch. This power was neither weapon nor tool. It was something far more primal. It was the power to remember. The Starborn sealed this force away, deep within the heart of a world yet to be named, hidden beneath layers of time and stone. They called it the Song of the Forgotten. Centuries passed, and the song became myth, its true nature buried beneath layers of legend and silence. Only fragments remained, whispers in ancient texts, forgotten codes encrypted in the vast galactic archives. But for Vespera, the queen of the Zarak dominion, those fragments were about to awaken. She sat alone in her chamber aboard the Oblivion throne. The hum of the ship's core a distant backdrop to the storm raging inside her mind. The stone the child had given her lay on the polished surface of her console, faintly glowing with an otherworldly light. The pulse she had felt earlier was growing stronger, like a heartbeat resonating through the very fabric of her armor. And then she heard it, a low, haunting hum, so subtle she might have imagined it, threading through the layers of her neural implants and the metallic shell of her exosuit. It was a melody both alien and achingly familiar, like a half-remembered lullaby from a childhood never lived. Vespera closed her eyes. The sound grew clearer, weaving itself through her thoughts. The child's song, the one she had hummed on that quiet hillside, was not mere melody. It was a code, a language older than the Dominion's greatest archives, older than any warlord's conquest. The song of the forgotten. In a flash, memories not her own surged into her consciousness. She saw ancient cities of crystal and light, inhabited by beings who spoke without words, communicating through shared dreams and the resonance of sound. She saw a time when the Starborn walked the stars, guardians of a secret too dangerous for any to hold. She saw the power itself, a shimmering web of energy, pulsing with the innocence of a child's first breath, the memory of every life that had ever been. But she also saw the cost. The song could unmake empires by revealing their hidden lies, by forcing them to confront the truths they had long buried. It was a mirror held to the soul of civilization, and many who gazed upon it were broken by what they saw. Vespera opened her eyes, breath shallow, heart racing. Her commanders would call it superstition, weakness, even madness. But she knew better. The song was real, and it was awakening. The child was not just an ordinary human. She was a living key, a beacon calling the ancient power from its slumber. The queen's thoughts raced. Could she control it? Could the Dominion harness such a force? Or would it unravel everything they had built? She felt the hum growing louder, the resonance vibrating through the metal walls, through her bones. Outside her window, the stars blinked coldly. Somewhere beneath Earth's surface, the song stirred, a silent promise of reckoning. Back on the hillside, the child continued to hum. Her eyes were closed now, face serene, lips moving in time with the invisible melody that connected her to the planet and to something far greater. The stone she had stacked began to shimmer faintly, glowing with an ethereal light. Around her, the air seemed to vibrate, as if the very atmosphere was alive with sound. And then, the child opened her eyes. They shone with an ancient wisdom that defied her years. She whispered to the wind. They hear it now. Vespera's ship pulsed with energy, systems responding to the growing frequency. She stood, armored fingers brushing the console where the stone rested. A voice, sharp and commanding, broke through the ship's comm channels. Your Majesty, the fleet demands orders. Shall we prepare to strike? The Queen's gaze hardened. Not yet, she said quietly. We must understand what we face before we destroy it. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk, a command that left no room for argument. She turned away from the window, toward the growing chorus inside her mind. The song was awakening, and with it, the fate of empires would be decided, not by weapons of war, but by the truth long forgotten. The Queen stood on the gentle slope of the grassy ridge, the child's eyes, a calm, unfathomable black, holding her gaze with an intensity that made the air itself feel heavy. Around them, the breeze whispered softly through the tall grasses, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and earth, a quiet song of peace that seemed almost alien to Vespera's war-hardened soul. Her soldiers behind her shifted nervously, their armor clinking softly, but none dared break the silence. Even the birds, usually fluttering about with careless cheer, had fallen still. It was as if the very universe had paused to witness this moment, this impossible, fragile moment where empires met innocence. Then the world twisted. A shimmer rippled through the air around her, like heat haze on a distant desert. Colors bled and folded upon themselves, warping the edges of her vision, pulling her away from the green hills and into something else entirely. She felt herself fall, though no ground came to meet her, and suddenly she was somewhere else. She was a child again, not the queen adorned with regal finery and commanding legions, but a frightened, trembling girl no older than 10. The chamber she stood in was dark and narrow, claustrophobic, with cold stone walls that seemed to close in on her like a tomb. In her hands was a crude wooden crown, rough and jagged, yet unbearably heavy. It burned against her skin, not with flame, but with a weight far more oppressive, the burden of a destiny she never asked for. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning oil. Faint echoes of distant screams floated through the cracks, but they were muffled, as if coming from worlds away. Around her, the ruins of her empire were falling apart. Cities she had once dreamed of ruling gleamed like jewels under alien suns. Now they were collapsing into rubble, swallowed by dust storms and fires that burned with unnatural colors: emerald green, deep violet, and icy blue. She saw towering spires shatter like glass, ships crashing from the sky in silent explosions, and countless faces contorted in pain and fear. Yet she could not reach them, could not help. Her lips moved, whispering prayers to gods who never answered. Each word fell like ash. The scene shifted, time accelerated and warped. She was older now, still alone, but no longer a frightened child. Her eyes held the cold steel of command, yet something deeper flickered beneath: doubt and a terrible exhaustion. She was in a vast throne room, its walls inscribed with the histories of her people, their triumphs and failures etched in bas-relief stone. But the throne was empty, a hollow monument to power lost. And in that silence, she saw her own end. Not a violent death in battle, but a slow, unbearable unraveling. Her empire did not fall to armies. It crumbled beneath the weight of understanding. Visions came unbidden, flashes of truths that no crown could shield against. She saw her own hands stained with blood, yet trembling with regret. She saw her soldiers' eyes, wide with confusion, questioning the very orders they had been sworn to follow. She saw the countless lives sacrificed for glory, ambition, and fear. And finally, she saw herself, face streaked with tears, kneeling in a ruined palace while the last flames of her dominion flickered out. She was broken not by the sword, but by a revelation. The realization that power was meaningless without wisdom, that conquest was hollow without empathy, that to truly rule, one must understand not just the strength of an empire, but the soul of those it sought to govern. Her soldiers behind her had not moved. They were statues, frozen in place by the weight of what she had seen, caught between disbelief and awe. The queen's knees gave way beneath her, the armored plates scraping against the rocky earth as she fell. She pressed her forehead to the soil, the cool dirt grounding her even as her mind raced through the visions. Then the child stepped forward. Without hesitation, she reached out a small hand and touched the queen's sleeve. The touch was light, but it carried a power that rippled through Vespera's very core. The child's voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "Go home. You don't belong here." The words hung in the air, a verdict spoken without anger, without hatred, but with an unyielding certainty. They resonated deep within the queen, unraveling the last threads of pride and defiance she clung to. She looked down at the child, at the innocent face framed by tangled hair and shining eyes that reflected something ancient, something beyond time and empires. And for the first time in her life, Vespera felt small, not as a ruler, but as a being humbled by a truth far greater than conquest or dominion. The grassy ridge seemed to exhale. The wind picked up once more, carrying the faint hum of the child's song, an ancient melody, old as the stars themselves, threading through the air like a promise. Vespera rose slowly, her breath steady but her heart forever changed. She turned away from the child, away from the ancient power stirring beneath the earth and sky. Her footsteps were heavy, echoing softly as she made her way back toward the waiting shadows of her dreadnought. Inside the cold, steel heart of the Oblivion throne, Vespera retreated to her private chamber. The weight of her crown felt different now, an anchor pulling her down rather than lifting her up. With deliberate hands, she removed it. The metal was cold against her skin, but as she lifted it away, she felt as though she was shedding a second skin, layers of arrogance, fear, and the crushing burden of leadership. She stared out of the viewport at the swirling blues and greens of Earth below. This was no longer a planet to be conquered or subdued. It was a mirror, reflecting her own shattered illusions. The queen sat in silence, the hum of the ship's engines a distant murmur. She thought of the child's song, the visions that had shown her the fragility beneath power. She thought of her empire, vast, proud, and yet teetering on the edge of ruin. And she knew the war was over. Not because Earth's armies had fired a single shot, not because fleets had clashed in blazing battles, but because something far older, far more profound had awakened. Something no weapon could kill. Vespera's eyes closed. She remembered the words of the child. She repeated them silently, a mantra that echoed in the deepest corners of her soul. "Go home. You don't belong here." For the first time, she understood. The conquest she sought was not of Earth, but of herself. The victory she needed was not over armies, but over fear. The peace she craved was not born of fire, but of understanding. When she opened her eyes again, the queen was no longer just a conqueror. She was a pilgrim, a seeker, and maybe, just maybe, the first to see that sometimes the greatest power was knowing when to walk away. The Oblivion throne prepared to depart Earth's orbit, leaving behind the world that had refused to bow. Vespera watched the receding planet grow smaller through the viewport, still alive, still whole, still singing the song of something far older than empires. The child's melody lingered in her mind, a promise and a warning. And as the stars stretched out before her, Vespera whispered a vow. She would return someday, not as a queen demanding tribute, but as a learner seeking understanding. Because the child had shown her something she could never unsee, and that was worth more than any throne. The queen's silhouette lingered a moment longer against the fading light of Earth's ridge, the child's final words echoing like a ghost in her mind. "Go home. You don't belong here." No one saw the slow, almost imperceptible shift in her eyes, a trembling of something buried deep beneath years of iron resolve and merciless command. It was the first crack in the armor of the mighty Vespera, the empress of the Zarak dominion. She turned sharply away from the child, the stones the soft grass beneath her boots, and walked without a glance back. Her soldiers awaited, taut and rigid, their war machines ready to roar across the void. But she gave no orders, no commands, no battle cries. Instead, she moved with a calmness that unnerved even her closest advisors. The Queen's personal shuttle hung silently, a dark shadow against the sprawling hull of the Oblivion throne. Without a word, she ascended the ramp, the hiss of the airlock closing behind her sealing the final curtain on the moment. In the ship's command center, murmurs and restless energy rippled through the ranks. Admirals and generals exchanged uncertain glances. What had happened out there on that quiet hillside? Why had their unyielding queen, the conqueror of countless worlds, retreated without firing a single shot? Fleet Commander Draven stood beside the command chair, his usually stern face pale under the harsh lights. "Her Majesty will issue orders soon," he said, though even he sounded unconvinced, but the moments stretched into an uneasy silence. Across the Dominion's communication arrays, news spread like wildfire. Worlds that had braced for the clash of titans were now left suspended in confusion. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Scholars and warlords debated fervently. Was this a sign of weakness? A trap? Or had the Empress glimpsed something none could understand? Back inside the Oblivion throne, Vespera sat alone in her chamber. Her crown lay on the polished metal table, cold and weightless. She traced its intricate patterns with a finger, as though trying to imprint the memory of it onto her skin before letting it go forever. The visions she had seen, the child's song, the collapse of her empire, the unbearable truth of understanding, played on a loop in her mind. She felt an unfamiliar ache, not for lost power or glory, but for something pure, something she could neither name nor resist. Outside, the fleet remained in orbit, poised on the edge of war. Without guidance, ships hovered silently, weapons powered down, systems in standby. The great dreadnoughts, with their planetary-class cannons and shimmering energy shields, became inert monuments. Fleet admirals sent countless transmissions, but none found their way through the Queen's silence. The Oblivion throne's bridge was darkened, the seat of command abandoned. Days passed, or was it hours? Time lost meaning in the void of uncertainty. Then, quietly, the Oblivion throne lifted from orbit. Its engines pulsed once, slow and steady, pushing away from Earth's magnetic field. One by one, the fleet's massive warships followed, aligning their vector toward the outer reaches, the dark and distant edge of known space where few dare to tread. The Galactic Council, an assembly of powerful species and rulers, convened in emergency session. Screens flickered with the latest images from Earth's system. The grand halls buzzed with voices raised in disbelief and speculation. Some saw opportunity, a weakness to be exploited. Others felt fear, for the Queen's retreat was unlike any defeat they had witnessed. It was a silent surrender to something greater than war. On Earth, the skies remained unchanged. The stars continued their ancient dance. No missiles streaked across the heavens. No fleets blotted out the sun. Instead, humanity watched the slow retreat of an empire's wrath with quiet bewilderment. The child from the hillside looked up at the starry canvas and whispered, "It is over." Her mother nodded, eyes reflecting the vast, unknowable night. Far from the battlefield, aboard the Oblivion throne, Vespera gazed at Earth one last time. Her voice was a murmur, barely audible to the empty room. "I came to conquer," she said, "but I found something more." She reached out, touching the viewport, as if to hold the fragile world in her palm. "And so I will go home." The fleet's engines flared, a silent farewell to the planet that had resisted not with weapons, but with something older, something human. In that moment, a new kind of power was born, one that whispered across the stars. Sometimes the greatest victory lies in knowing when to step back, and when to let peace be the final conqueror. The silence left in the wake of the Empress's retreat was not an empty void. It became a seedbed for rumors, whispered on countless worlds across the Zarak Dominion. Her people, once proud and unyielding, now found themselves gripped by an unfamiliar sensation, fear. It crept into the hearts of generals, counselors, and common citizens alike, twisting itself into sleepless nights and paranoid glances. Why had Vespera vanished without a trace? Why had she abandoned the throne that had been forged through centuries of conquest? No one was given answers. No official word, no declaration. Only silence. In the grand halls of the Zarak High Council, chambers once resounding with the booming voice of the Empress now echoed with uneasy murmurs. Her absence was a wound deeper than any sword could inflict. Some claimed she was dead. Others believed she had been overthrown by shadowy factions hungry to seize power. The truth was more elusive. Rumors told of the queen retreating to the hillside, the same remote place on earth where she had encountered the child whose song had unmade her resolve. Some said she stayed there, wandering among the stones, lost to a world she once sought to dominate. Meanwhile, the vast empire she had ruled with iron certainty began to unravel. Systems once tightly controlled slipped through the cracks. Planets declared autonomy. Governors raised their banners in rebellion. Yet Earth remained untouched. No fleets bombarded its cities. No soldiers marched across its plains. It was as if the Empress's silent withdrawal had unleashed a force more devastating than any weapon. The collapse was quiet but inexorable. Far-flung star systems once loyal to the Zarak Empire now awoke to a new reality. Without the Empress's iron fist, old rivalries reignited. Factions that had long awaited a chance to topple the Dominion's rule surged forward. But the defeat was not born of battlefields or sieges. It was the absence of command, the void of leadership, the poison of doubt. Galactic traders whispered of empty communication channels, ships vanishing without trace, supply lines disrupted by unseen sabotage. Zarak military installations that had stood unyielding for centuries fell into silence. The once mighty warships, symbols of imperial might, were found adrift, seemingly abandoned, their crews gone without explanation. Among the scattered refugees from fallen Zarak worlds, stories spread of a spectral figure, the Queen herself, seen wandering alone on the remote ridge where it all began. Some claimed she spoke to the wind, as if trying to hear the child's song again. Others whispered that she had become a ghost, neither alive nor dead, caught between her empire's ruin and the faint hope of redemption. On Earth, the news of the Zarak Empire's unraveling came slowly, filtered through distant transmissions and the faint echoes of spaceborne whispers. Humanity said little. They watched and waited, their own memories of conquest and loss giving them a wary patience. The child who once greeted the Queen on that grassy hillside now grew under peaceful skies, unaware that her simple smile had sparked the downfall of a cosmic empire. In the shadows of the Zarak Dominion's collapse, new powers began to stir. Galactic neighbors who had long feared the Empress's wrath now dared to imagine a future free from the Dominion's shadow. Yet even among the victors, no one forgot the strange, quiet force that had undone the Empire, not with fire and blood, but with a song carried on a breeze. The galaxy learned an ancient truth anew. Empires built on fear crumble beneath the weight of silence. And sometimes, the most profound revolutions begin not with weapons, but with a simple, unspoken act of mercy. The room was small, almost claustrophobic, buried deep within an unmarked government facility. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sterile shadows across cold steel walls. A single metal table stood in the center, littered with papers, sketches, and strange devices that hummed softly, tuned to frequencies barely audible. Across from the table sat a girl no older than 7, her wide eyes calm, yet unsettlingly knowing. She did not fidget or show the restless energy one might expect from a child so young. Instead, she sat quietly, her fingers tracing intricate patterns on the surface, as if drawing secrets from the air itself. A man in a dark suit observed her carefully. Agent Callan had been briefed on everything, almost everything. Classified files, encrypted transmissions, whispered legends passed down by those who had survived the encounter with the Zarak Empress. And yet, nothing had prepared him for the gravity of this moment. He leaned forward, sliding a set of drawings across the table. "These are yours?" he asked softly. The girl nodded. Callan picked up the first sketch. It was a sprawling star map, not like any known galaxy cataloged by human explorers, but a complex web of stars, nebulae, and shadowy voids. Lines of light connected distant points, some pulsating with ominous energy. "These aren't just drawings," Callan murmured. "They're predictions." The girl smiled faintly, almost sadly. "I see things," she said simply. "Not all of them have happened yet." He glanced at the next page, a battlefield scarred by unimaginable technology. Ships burned with a light that defied physics, and soldiers fought beneath alien suns. "Wars that haven't come," Callan said. "But will." She nodded again. Faces in the margins of her sketches caught Callan's eye. Familiar faces. Faces he had seen in classified files. Scientists, generals, political figures, all connected by shadowy lines and covert dossiers. "How do you know them?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. The girl's eyes darkened for a moment. "They're part of the plan," she said. "The ones who built me, and the ones who feared what I might become." Callan's mind raced. Could she be some sort of living archive? A child created not by biology alone, but by secrets buried deep in humanity's past? He asked the question that had haunted him since his briefing. "Who are you?" The girl looked up, her gaze piercing. "I'm what they made when they feared what you'd become." Silence settled between them like a thick fog. Callan swallowed hard, realizing that the war they had feared was not just out there among the stars, but inside themselves. "She saw me. That's why she ran." The memory of the Empress's retreat took on a new meaning now. The Queen had not fled because she was weak. She had fled because she recognized something ancient and dangerous in this child, something that transcended empires and weapons. The child was a living symbol of humanity's capacity to change, to remember, and to resist annihilation not through firepower, but through empathy and understanding. Callan stood, the weight of this revelation pressing down on him. Outside the facility, the world moved on unaware. But deep in hidden halls, the future was already being rewritten. And the child who wasn't just a child held the key.